All right, there's lots to get to, so let's get to it. First, let's get started with the Emergencies Act. Andrew Lawton says there is some misinformation, circulating that the Public Order Emergency Commission's Paul Rouleau, Justice Rouleau, has a familial connection to Justin Trudeau. The purported connection is that Paul Rouleau's brother, Pierre Rouleau, was married to Justin's aunt, Suzette Trudeau. It's true that Justin Trudeau's aunt Suzette married a Pierre Rouleau. Suzette was born in 1918 and died in 2008. The Pierre Rouleau married to Suzette Trudeau, who would have been Justin's uncle by marriage, was born in 1919 and died in 1995, including this tweet in the thread for posterity. So Andrew Lawton's admitting a mistake. I didn't know. I checked that the aunt had a husband named Pierre Rouleau, and I thought, why isn't this bigger news? Here's why it wasn't bigger news. And I thought that it was something that probably should have come out during the commission anyway, if that was legit. But there were a whole bunch of people reporting it, so I'm glad that we were able to set the record straight. Sometimes you get things wrong. So this was one of those instances. You get bamboozled by the internet. Maxime Bernier says, a pleasure to meet Candace Sereau, the woman who was trampled by the police horses sent by Trudeau 1 year ago today in Ottawa at the Freedom Rally in Duggard, Manitoba. So he got to meet her in Manitoba, and she was trampled by horses in Ottawa. It took me a few times to read that. I was wondering why he was including the Manitoba thing. I understood after. So the Freedom Convoy, the POEC ruling, the fact that Trudeau gets to appoint Rouleau, and the fact that Rouleau was a donor to the Liberal Party, all still big problems, in my opinion. Here's the Canadian Independent. They're reporting Canadian Civil Liberties Association speaks out about the Public Commission report. The CCLA says they will pursue a judicial review of the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So here's about a minute of this. It's an 8-minute long video. So we're just going to watch a little bit of it. Here we go.
My name is Noah Mendelson-Aviv. I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Today, the Public Order Emergency Commission released its report to the public. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association appreciates the work of Justice Rouleau and Commission staff, but respectfully disagrees with some of his conclusions and will be pursuing our judicial review of the federal government's invocation of the Emergencies Act last winter. In January and February of 2022, protests in and around Canada, and in particular, the occupation of Ottawa and blockading of its streets, created significant disruption and hardship for Ottawa's residents, including reports of racist and homophobic intimidation and harassment, possibly worse, and concerns about ongoing underprotection of these and other marginalized groups by police. After this occupation had gone on for too long, on February 14th, 2022, the federal government handed itself the power to make laws with almost no constraint. The Emergencies Act allows the federal government to give itself the power to create laws without a first, second, or third reading before Parliament, without advance opportunity for input from the press, public, or opposition parties. In short, without the ordinary democratic protections of transparency, accountability, public review, and input, without a full debate before all elected representatives. In other words, the Emergencies Act can suspend the ordinary democratic process. This might be necessary in rare instances, but it was not justified last winter, and it is a dangerous power for any current or future government. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association spoke out then and is here today because we are concerned about democracy, about equality, about justice, and about rights. We want to make sure that all people, including in particular those with the least power, platforms, and voice, with grievances and concerns about injustice, can protest government and other institutions, that they can do so powerfully, peacefully, and yes, sometimes disruptively. This is critically necessary to ensure that everyone can learn about violations and stand together for the rights of all people in Canada. CCLA has decades of experience standing up for protesters.
So I'll pause that there. Interesting angle to take it from. I don't know if they're ideologically aligned or ideologically captured, or if this is a strategy with regard to discussing the siege of the people of Ottawa by the mean protesters, the mean truckers. I don't know if it's a strategy or what, but it's interesting. So they're going to be accessing a judicial review. And Eva says that it is beyond judicial review. This is from a Toronto Star article, so I'll just read the quotes from the convoy lawyer. So this Eva Chipik was the convoy lawyer for the POEC. So she was in the room with Justin Trudeau. She told him that he needs to resign. She was in the room with Justice Rouleau when the government was giving them documents at the last minute and behaving inappropriately and not being held accountable by the court or the Judge Rouleau. Anyway, regardless, here's her tweets. She says, quote, "The report is a parliamentary report and it is immune from judicial review or appeal. The commission was an untransparent process riddled with unlawfully redacted Government of Canada records and suppressed evidence. With no remedy available to deal with these major shortcomings, the report may be good for good politics for certain parties, but it flies in the face of the rule of law and constitutionalism." Brendan Miller, lawyer for the Freedom Convoy protesters who were in Ottawa last winter. In other words, we were handcuffed and blindfolded in an uphill battle, all while the federal government and the commission threw stones down on us. Thanks for all of your support. Let's regroup and come back stronger. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Aaron Werdick says the Emergencies Act threshold is now incompetence, apparently. Commission concludes government can do what it wants, no matter what the legislation actually says. If you were looking for some weekend reading, Justice Paul Rouleau has you covered. Friday's release of the Public Order Emergencies Commission voluminous 2,092-page final report authored by Rouleau is nothing if not thorough. It incorporates everything from an analysis of the history of the early 2022 convoy and border blockades, media coverage, police operational decisions, and government action, capped off with analysis findings and recommendations. Wow, it's a very, very dense report. For a government with a lot of fires to put out, you can't blame them, but scratch the surface of the report and the caveats start to become apparent. In considering the measures used under the Act, Rouleau acknowledges that the Commission, quote, does not have the legal authority to render a formal judgment on the lawfulness of the measures, which are the proper purview of a court. Accordingly, his choice of the preferred standard of appropriateness is more, quote, open-textured standard that permits me to assess the measures holistically. And he does not, quote, intend to consider my findings on this topic to be in any sense binding on the courts. To be fair to Rouleau, he knew he was caught between a rock and a hard place, failed to make a finding and be accused of ducking, or worse, or make a finding and get pilloried for stepping outside of his mandate. In the end, he decided to split the difference. While finding that the government met the high threshold required, he noted he did not come to this conclusion easily and did not consider the facts or the factual basis to be overwhelming, while allowing that there is significant strength to the arguments against reaching it. Much of Rouleau's rationale rests on the well-established criminal law reasonable belief standard, which holds that the perfect judgment is not required, but merely that a decision maker in possession of certain set of facts acts in a way that is considered reasonable. There is little to quibble with here as a general principle, but surprisingly, Rouleau simply shrugs off the government's refusal to release the key legal opinion it received, suggesting it met the legal threshold to invoke the act. Instead, Rouleau points to testimony from several witnesses, including the Prime Minister, Attorney General, and Clerk of the Privy Council, accepting that their own interpretation of this unknown advice was sufficient. There are other eyebrow-raising passages, for example, in his analysis of whether the government met the threshold set out in Section 3 of the Act, that a situation must be one that cannot be effectively dealt with by any other law of Canada. Rouleau concludes that the test is met on the basis of the modifier effectively, as opposed to the verb cannot. In doing so, he essentially lowers the threshold for the Act, giving a new basis for future governments to invoke the Act, rooted not in legal necessity, but administrative or operational incompetence. Fortunately for Canada, the Rouleau report does not represent the last word on the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act. The court of public opinion may be beyond sway, but from a legal standpoint, the federal court and 2 judicial review applications currently underway before it will likely still have something to say. For the sake of posterity and to discourage future use of the act, we should hope they reach different conclusions. I am not holding my breath as the legal system in our country seems to be perverted to the point of uselessness. The Anti-Hatred Network says, to those who haven't started reading the POEC, it is written by a crazy person. Rouleau, the Muppet, is detached from reality. Here's one quote below part 1, page 30. Rouleau ponders the lack of confidence in public institutions. And he says, or the report says, the lack of confidence in public institutions, such as public health authorities, led many to question the value of these measures. Political discourse was increasingly hostile. The politicians and public health officials who imposed these rules were not to be merely criticized. For some vocal opponents, they were enemies to be imprisoned or worse. So yeah, it does sound like a page turner for the weekend. If you're interested in finishing off your long weekend with the Rouleau report, it's interesting. It's full of gems like that. There are more, but I didn't feel like going through all of the little highlights that I cut yesterday or that I pulled out yesterday because they're a little bit repetitive, and it's just reimagining what happened to fit into the narrative. So it got boring for me really quick. CPAC says, this is Poilievre doing a little speech. There's 2 I've got for you here, but this is a quote from the speech. This was an emergency that Justin created by attacking his own population. Okay, I'll let Poilievre say the rest. Here we go.
This was an emergency that Justin Trudeau created by attacking his own population, by driving up their cost of living, by making it impossible for people to pay their bills and live their lives in peace. He caused the emergency that unfolded. And then when he caused it, he piled on, he poured more gasoline on the fire with nasty insults, jabbing his finger in the faces of his own citizens, something that even today's report acknowledged contributed to the length and the intensity of the protest. This was an emergency that Justin Trudeau... This was an emergency that...
So Poilievre is talking about it a little bit, talking about the Rouleau report a little bit. It's a long one, so maybe his team hasn't read it yet. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on. Usually there's a strategy, or this is the response line we're going to take, and you have like a skeleton put together. Like we're gonna respond in this way, and this is kind of the main points of the speech that I want to make. And then you fill in details as the report becomes available and you read through it. Hello everyone, thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com or CanadaPoly2.locals.com for full episodes of Canada Poly Daily, looking at Canadian politics from a Canadian point of view. Thanks for watching everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful